Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where beauty was never just about appearance. In ancient Egypt, a painted eye could reflect status, protection, and belief all at once. A scented oil might signal refinement, but it could also answer the heat of the desert and the demands of daily life. And behind the polished stone statues and painted tomb walls, there was a very real routine shaped by climate, class, religion, and careful habit. If you enjoy calm, thoughtful history like this, consider subscribing. A lot of regular viewers do, simply so they can keep finding these slower, deeper journeys into the past whenever a new one arrives. To understand the ancient Egyptian beauty routine, it helps to begin with a basic truth about life along the Nile. Egypt was beautiful, fertile, and rich in agricultural possibility, but it was also hot, bright, and often unforgiving. Skin dried quickly in the sun. Dust settled everywhere. Sweat, river water, oils, and perfumes all became part of ordinary physical life. In that setting, what we would call beauty was closely tied to cleanliness, comfort, identity, and order. Looking well cared for was not a trivial luxury. It reflected discipline, dignity, and participation in a civilized world. Cleanliness came first. For both men and women, washing the body was an important habit, particularly among those who could afford servants, oils, and cosmetic materials. The wealthy bathed more regularly and had access to finer ingredients, but even beyond elite households, bodily care mattered. Linen garments, frequent washing, and shaving or trimming body hair all appear to have been part of the Egyptian ideal of refinement. In a hot climate, hair could be difficult to manage and body hair could be associated with discomfort or uncleanness. Priests, especially, were expected to maintain very strict standards of bodily purity, and these religious habits influenced wider ideas about what it meant to be properly groomed. One of the most striking features of Egyptian appearance was the treatment of the hair. In artwork, we often see thick, dark, elegant hairstyles, but these images can be misleading if taken too literally. Many Egyptians, especially among the upper classes, shaved their heads or kept their natural hair very short. This helped with heat, hygiene, and lice. Over that closely managed base, they might wear wigs made from human hair, wool, or plant fibers, carefully arranged into formal styles. These wigs were not mere costume. They were a practical and aesthetic solution, allowing people to maintain a polished appearance while reducing the burden of caring for natural hair in a harsh climate. For the elite, wigs could become quite elaborate, signaling wealth and taste. They could also be scented or dressed with perfumed cones or oils during special occasions. Skin care was equally important. The Egyptian environment was hard on the skin, and oils served several purposes at once. They softened dryness, reduced irritation, added scent, and gave the body a healthy finish. Ingredients such as castor oil, morina oil, sesame oil, and animal fats could be blended into ointments and salves. Some recipes may also have included resins, herbs, and aromatic substances imported through long-distance trade. These were not casual luxuries in the modern sense. They were part of a world where daily bodily maintenance had real practical value. A smooth, perfumed skin was pleasant, certainly, but it also helped protect against cracking, dryness, and the discomfort of constant heat. Fragrance was deeply woven into Egyptian beauty culture. Perfume was not simply something added at the end of a routine. It was part of the whole experience of bodily presence. Cones of scented fat or wax, shown in many banquet scenes, were likely placed on wigs or heads so that fragrance could slowly release in the warmth. Whether every artistic depiction represented a literal everyday object is still debated, but there is no doubt that scent mattered enormously. The Egyptians valued aromatic materials such as myrrh, frankincense, lotus, cinnamon-like substances, and other imported resins. These scents linked the body to luxury, worship, and order. A pleasant smell was civilized. It suggested care, resources, and nearness to the sacred, because temple ritual also depended heavily on incense and perfumed offerings. Then there were the eyes, perhaps the most famous element of the ancient Egyptian beauty routine. Black and green eye paint became one of the defining visual features of Egyptian art, but it was never only decorative. The black cosmetic known as kohl was usually made from galena, a lead-based mineral, while green pigments often came from malachite. Applied around the eyes with small sticks or spoons, these cosmetics created the dramatic almond-shaped outlines still associated with Egypt today. Yet the purpose went beyond style. Eye paint helped reduce glare from the powerful sun, offered some physical protection against dust and irritation, and may even have had antimicrobial benefits in certain forms. In Egyptian thought, the painted eye also carried symbolic meaning. The eye was connected to health, power, and divine protection. To outline the eyes was, in some sense, to prepare the face to meet both the physical world and the unseen one. Cosmetic containers themselves reveal how serious this routine could be. Archaeologists have recovered beautifully carved jars, palettes, spoons, and tubes designed to store ointments, pigments, and perfumes. These objects were often made with extraordinary care, suggesting that the act of preparing the body was worthy of beautiful tools. In elite life, cosmetics were part of household wealth. They could be gifted, stored, and even buried with the dead. That final point matters. Beauty in ancient Egypt was tied not just to the living body but to the eternal one. Tomb goods frequently included mirrors, combs, cosmetic vessels, and jewelry, because appearance and preparation extended into the afterlife. To be properly equipped beyond death was part of remaining complete. The face was not treated only with eye paint. Red ochre could be used to add color to the lips and cheeks. This gave warmth to the face and likely complemented the smoother, more even look created by oils and careful washing. Beauty here was subtle in one sense and highly visible in another. The goal was not endless variation or fashion reinvention in the modern style. It was the maintenance of an ideal appearance. Clean skin, ordered hair, defined eyes, pleasant scent, and fine linen. Repetition mattered. Stability mattered. In this, Egyptian beauty reflected broader Egyptian civilization, which prized continuity, harmony, and the maintenance of proper forms. Jewelry also played an important role in the full beauty routine. Broad collars, bracelets, rings, earrings, and amulets all shaped the finished appearance of the body. Gold, faience, semi-precious stones, colored glass, and carefully worked beads allowed the Egyptians to create striking visual contrast against skin and linen. But jewelry, like I paint, did more than decorate. It could signal status, invoke divine protection, and place a person within a network of meanings understood by the society around them. A cosmetic routine did not end at the skin. It extended into adornment, scent, clothing, and symbolic objects worn on the body. Class, of course, changed everything. The beauty routine of a royal woman or high official's household was very different from that of an ordinary laboring family. The wealthy had access to imported materials, servants, polished mirrors, finer oils, and more elaborate wigs. Yet the ideal itself seems to have been widely shared. Cleanliness, grooming, and the use of at least simple cosmetics were admired across the culture. Even when the materials differed, the values remained recognizable. To be orderly in body was to show respect for self, society, and the gods. Women are often centered in modern discussions of ancient beauty, but Egyptian men also participated fully in these routines. Men wore eye cosmetics, used oils, shaved, perfumed themselves, and took care with dress and hair. Beauty was not sharply divided along modern assumptions. Presentation mattered for everyone, especially in formal, religious, and elite settings. The preserved images of Egyptian officials, nobles, queens, and priests show a culture in which bodily care was a normal part of respectable life, not an exception or a private vanity. What makes the ancient Egyptian beauty routine so compelling today is that it sits at the meeting point of intimacy and empire. On one level, it is about combs, jars, pigments, mirrors, and daily habit. On another, it is about trade routes bringing incense from distant lands, mineral extraction for pigments, temple beliefs about purity, and a civilization's deep commitment to visible order. The person lining their eyes in a polished bronze mirror was participating in something larger than fashion. They were living inside a system of meaning where the body itself could become a small reflection of cosmic balance. And that may be the most enduring lesson here. Ancient Egyptian beauty was never only about looking attractive. It was about managing the body in a difficult environment, presenting oneself with dignity, and aligning everyday life with ideas of purity, status, and sacred order. The routine was practical, social, and spiritual all at once. That is why it still feels so recognizable from a distance, and yet so different when viewed closely. Another essential tool within the Egyptian beauty routine was the mirror. Polished bronze mirrors, often mounted on handles shaped like lotus flowers, papyrus stems, or elegant figures, appear frequently in archaeological discoveries and tomb paintings. These mirrors were not identical to the glass mirrors we know today, but when carefully polished they reflected the face clearly enough for cosmetic preparation. The mirror held both practical and symbolic meaning. The lotus shape that often appeared in mirror handles was connected with rebirth and the daily rising of the sun, subtly linking the act of grooming with the renewal of life itself. Cosmetic palettes were equally important. These flat stone surfaces, sometimes carved into decorative shapes such as animals or shields, were used to grind minerals like malachite and galena into fine powders. A small amount of water or oil could then be mixed with the powder to create a paste that was ready to apply around the eyes. The grinding process required patience and care, and in wealthier households servants likely assisted in preparing these materials. The presence of palettes in graves dating back thousands of years shows that cosmetic preparation was already established long before the Great Pyramids were built. The Egyptian focus on skin protection also extended to treatments that resemble early forms of medicinal cosmetics. Recipes preserved in medical papyri describe mixtures designed to soothe irritation, soften skin, or treat minor infections. Honey, for example, was valued not only for sweetness but also for its natural antibacterial properties. When mixed with oils or plant extracts, it could become part of soothing balms. Similarly, milk-based preparations and plant oils were sometimes used to help maintain smooth skin in the intense desert climate. In this way, the line between medicine and beauty was often blurred. Climate played a decisive role in shaping these habits. The sun along the Nile Valley could be relentless, especially during the long summer months. Dark eye cosmetics helped reduce the glare of reflected sunlight from water and sand, acting almost like a primitive form of sunglasses. At the same time, oils protected exposed skin from cracking and dryness. The beauty routine therefore developed partly as a response to environmental conditions. What later appeared as iconic style was originally grounded in simple survival and comfort. Religion quietly influenced these practices as well. Egyptian belief placed enormous importance on the concept of balance and order, often described by the word ma'at. To live in harmony with ma'at meant maintaining proper behavior, proper ritual, and proper appearance. A body that was clean, orderly, and carefully prepared reflected this wider sense of balance. In temple rituals, priests purified themselves repeatedly before approaching sacred spaces. These standards of purity helped shape wider social ideas about grooming and bodily presentation. The connection between beauty and the divine becomes especially clear when examining depictions of Egyptian gods and goddesses. Deities in temple reliefs often appear with the same carefully outlined eyes and composed expressions seen in human portraits. The ideal human appearance mirrored the divine image. By wearing cosmetics and jewelry, individuals were not only presenting themselves attractively, but also aligning their appearance with sacred symbolism. The painted eye could echo the powerful eye of Horus, a symbol of protection, healing, and royal authority. Even the tools of beauty carried aesthetic significance. Cosmetic jars might be carved from alabaster or decorated with intricate shapes resembling animals, flowers, or human figures. Small spoons used for ointments sometimes featured handles shaped like swimmers, birds, or lotus blossoms. These objects reveal a culture that valued artistry even in the most personal parts of daily life. Preparing the body was not rushed or hidden away. It was a moment that could be accompanied by beautifully crafted objects and quiet attention. Over centuries, Egyptian beauty traditions remained remarkably consistent. Dynasties rose and fell, rulers changed, and foreign powers occasionally entered the Nile Valley. Yet the basic elements of grooming persisted. Linen clothing remained preferred for its lightness and cleanliness. Cosmetics continued to frame the face. Oils and perfumes continued to soften the skin and scent the body. This stability reflected the broader Egyptian worldview, which favored continuity and the preservation of long-established practices. Archaeological discoveries from royal tombs make this continuity especially vivid. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, for example, researchers uncovered cosmetic containers still holding traces of ancient ointments and pigments. Small jars of black kohl and other cosmetic materials remain sealed for more than 3,000 years. These discoveries offer a direct connection to the daily routines of individuals who lived in the palace. They remind us that behind the monumental temples and pyramids were people who still began their day by washing, grooming, and preparing their appearance. Beauty in ancient Egypt was therefore not an isolated luxury but a reflection of cultural values that extended through every level of society. Cleanliness expressed respect for the body. Cosmetics connected the individual to protection and symbolism. Jewelry and fragrance communicated status and refinement. Together, these elements formed a routine that balanced practicality with meaning. And perhaps this is why the image of the Egyptian face, calm, composed, framed by dark-lined eyes, has endured for thousands of years. It represents more than decoration. It reflects a civilization that believed order could exist even in the smallest details of everyday life. As Egyptian society continued to develop across the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, beauty routines became increasingly refined, especially among the upper classes. Large households belonging to officials, nobles, and members of the royal court often included servants whose responsibilities involved preparing cosmetics, arranging wigs, and maintaining wardrobes of linen garments and jewelry. Grooming could become a small daily ritual within elite homes, carried out with patience and precision. In wall paintings from tombs, attendants are sometimes shown presenting cosmetic tools, mirrors, or jars of ointment to their masters and mistresses. These scenes were not simply decorative. They reflected the real importance placed on personal presentation in Egyptian life. The wig workshops of ancient Egypt were particularly impressive. Archaeological evidence suggests that wigs were carefully constructed from strands of human hair that were cleaned, sorted, and woven into a base made from linen threads or leather. Some wigs were styled into tight curls, while others formed long, straight sections that framed the face and shoulders. The more elaborate examples could be layered and decorated with beads or ribbons. Wealthy individuals might own several wigs suited for different occasions. A simpler wig might be worn in daily activities, while a more elaborate version could be reserved for festivals, ceremonies, or formal gatherings. Perfume production was another area where Egyptian craftsmanship reached remarkable sophistication. Creating fragrance required knowledge of plant resins, flowers, oils, and the careful blending of ingredients. Some perfumes were produced by soaking aromatic plants in oil and allowing the scent to slowly infuse. Others required heating mixtures so that resins and oils combined more smoothly. Myrrh and frankincense, imported from regions to the south and east, were especially prized. These substances were so valuable that entire trade routes were organized to bring them into Egypt. When worn on the skin, these perfumes created a subtle scent that could last for hours in the warm climate. Egyptian cosmetics also reveal an early understanding of materials and chemistry. Galena, the mineral used to create black coal, contained compounds that could stimulate small amounts of nitric oxide production in the skin, which in turn may have helped the immune system fight certain infections. Although the Egyptians did not understand the science in modern terms, their long experience with these materials likely taught them which mixtures were beneficial and which were not. Over generations, these observations became part of traditional knowledge passed down through families and craftsmen. Another important part of the beauty routine involved clothing. Egyptian garments were most often made from linen woven from flax plants grown along the Nile. Linen was valued because it was light, breathable, and comfortable in the heat. After bathing and applying oils or perfumes, individuals would dress in freshly cleaned linen garments that draped naturally around the body. For men, this might be a kilt-like garment tied around the waist. For women, long linen dresses often extended from the shoulders down to the ankles. Wealthier individuals might wear linen that had been finely pleated, creating elegant textures that caught the light. Jewelry completed the visual presentation of the body. Egyptian artisans worked with gold more extensively than many other ancient civilizations, largely because Egypt possessed accessible gold mines in the eastern desert and Nubia. Gold did not tarnish, and its warm color symbolized the flesh of the gods in Egyptian religious thought. Necklaces known as broad collars were especially popular. These collars were made from rows of beads crafted from gold, colored glass, turquoise, carnelian, and other materials. When worn across the shoulders and chest, they created a striking visual contrast against the white linen garments. Cosmetic practices also began early in life. Children of wealthy families were often introduced to grooming habits while still young. Tomb paintings sometimes show children with shaved heads, except for a single braided lock known as the side lock of youth. This hairstyle had cultural significance and was eventually replaced as the child grew older. Over time, young Egyptians learned the same routines practiced by adults. washing regularly, caring for the skin, and preparing their appearance for social occasions. Interestingly, mirrors and cosmetic containers were not always purely personal possessions. Some items were exchanged as gifts, particularly within families or between married couples. A finely carved cosmetic spoon or an alabaster jar filled with fragrant oil could be presented as a gesture of affection or respect. These gifts reinforced social relationships while also emphasizing the importance of personal care within Egyptian culture. Beauty practices were not limited to private life. Public festivals provided opportunities for people to display their finest appearance. During religious celebrations, large groups gathered for music, dancing, feasting, and ritual processions. Participants would often wear their best wigs, jewelry, perfumes, and cosmetics. The environment of these festivals, filled with incense and music, made personal presentation even more noticeable. Looking well prepared during these occasions was a sign of honor toward both the community and the gods being celebrated. Perhaps most fascinating is how these routines crossed the boundary between life and death. Egyptians believed that the body would continue to exist in the afterlife, and therefore it should remain complete and properly prepared. Cosmetic jars, mirrors, combs, and jewelry were frequently placed in tombs so that the deceased could continue caring for their appearance beyond death. Even the process of mummification involved careful treatment of the skin using oils, resins, and perfumes. The goal was preservation, but it also reflected the same deep respect for the human body seen in everyday grooming habits. In this way, the Egyptian beauty routine becomes something much larger than a collection of cosmetics. It becomes a window into how this civilization understood the relationship between the body, society, nature, and the divine. Grooming the body was part of maintaining order. Maintaining order was part of honoring the gods. And honoring the gods was essential to sustaining the harmony that Egyptians believed allowed their world to flourish along the banks of the Nile. Even today, thousands of years later, when we look at statues of Egyptian queens or painted tomb portraits with their sharply defined eyes and calm expressions, we are seeing the final result of these daily routines. Behind every image was a quiet process of washing, preparing oils, grinding pigments, arranging wigs, and fastening jewelry. It was a process repeated day after day, generation after generation, forming one of the most recognizable visual identities in the history of human civilization. Over time, Egyptian beauty practices also became closely associated with social identity. The way someone presented themselves could reveal subtle information about their status, occupation, and role within society. Officials serving in the royal administration often appeared in tomb paintings with carefully arranged wigs, refined cosmetics, and finely pleated linen garments. These visual details were not accidental. They communicated stability, discipline, and authority. In a civilization that valued order and hierarchy, appearance became a quiet language through which people expressed their place within the social structure. Royal women, especially queens and princesses, helped shape some of the most recognizable beauty traditions. The court of ancient Egypt placed significant emphasis on elegance and presentation, and royal figures were often depicted wearing elaborate wigs, richly colored cosmetics, and layered jewelry. These images were carefully crafted to communicate power as well as grace. When we see the famous bust of Queen Nefertiti, for example, the balanced facial features, the smooth skin, and the defined eyes represent more than personal beauty. They reflect the Egyptian artistic ideal: calm, controlled, and harmonious. Cosmetics were stored and transported in containers that could be surprisingly complex. Some cosmetic chests discovered in tombs contain multiple compartments designed to hold powders, oils, applicators, and small mirrors. This suggests that beauty routines were organized and methodical. Tools were kept carefully, and ingredients were protected from heat and dust. Even small applicators, often made from wood, bone, or ivory, were crafted with precision. Their shape allowed users to apply eye cosmetics smoothly along the eyelids, creating the distinct elongated eye line seen in Egyptian artwork. The Egyptian appreciation for visual balance also influenced how cosmetics were applied. Eye paint was typically extended outward toward the temples, emphasizing the almond shape of the eye. This design did not appear random. Egyptian artists consistently portrayed faces with strong horizontal lines around the eyes, giving the expression a composed and almost timeless appearance. By extending the cosmetic line outward, individuals could recreate that ideal look in everyday life, aligning their appearance with the artistic and cultural standards admired throughout the civilization. Hair oils and scented treatments continued to play an important role as well. Oils helped maintain wigs by keeping the fibers flexible and preventing dryness. In some cases, scented substances were applied to wigs so that fragrance gently surrounded the wearer. In crowded social gatherings or temple ceremonies, the presence of pleasant scent would have been noticeable and appreciated. Egyptian society placed strong value on sensory experience. The smell of incense in temples, the sound of music in festivals, and the visual beauty of carefully prepared clothing and cosmetics. Even laborers and craftsmen, who lived very different lives from the elite, shared some aspects of this culture of grooming. Archaeological sites such as the workers' village at Deir el-Medina reveal that ordinary people also owned small cosmetic items. Though their materials were simpler and less expensive, the desire to maintain cleanliness and personal care was still present. A small jar of ointment or a basic cosmetic stick could still form part of a daily routine before beginning work or attending community events. Trade networks played a hidden but important role in sustaining these beauty traditions. Many cosmetic ingredients were not native to the Nile Valley. Resins used for perfume often arrived from regions such as Punt, believed to be located somewhere along the Red Sea coast of East Africa. Lapis lazuli, a deep blue stone sometimes used in jewelry, came from distant mines in what is now Afghanistan. These long-distance trade routes allowed Egyptian artisans to access rare materials, which then became part of elite cosmetic and decorative culture. Beauty, in this sense, was connected to international exchange and economic strength. The Egyptians also valued the appearance of healthy teeth and breath. Although dental care in ancient Egypt was limited compared to modern standards, there is evidence that some people used early forms of tooth cleaning powders made from crushed minerals or herbs. Breath fresheners made from aromatic seeds or plants may also have been used. These details show that grooming extended beyond the visible parts of the face and body, reflecting a broader concern with personal cleanliness. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian beauty culture is how little it changed over millennia. The same basic routine, washing, applying oils, lining the eyes, arranging the hair or wig, and dressing in linen, can be observed from early dynastic periods through the height of the New Kingdom. Few civilizations maintained such long-lasting visual traditions. This consistency reflects the Egyptian admiration for stability and continuity. When something worked well and symbolized order, it was preserved rather than constantly reinvented. In the quiet moments of daily life, these routines must have felt ordinary. Someone might sit beside a small mirror, dip an applicator into a jar of kohl, and carefully trace the line along the eyelid. Another person might rub scented oil into the skin after bathing in cool water drawn from the Nile. These were simple actions, repeated countless times across generations. Yet together they formed a cultural tradition strong enough to leave its mark on history. Today, when modern viewers recognize the dramatic black-lined eyes and elegant presentation of ancient Egyptians, they are seeing the visible result of these deeply rooted habits. What appears at first glance to be a distinctive artistic style was actually built from thousands of quiet daily rituals. Through washing, grooming, fragrance, and adornment, the people of ancient Egypt expressed their belief that beauty, order, and dignity belonged not only to kings and temples, but also to the ordinary rhythms of everyday life along the Nile. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian beauty culture is how little it changed over millennia. The same basic routine, washing, applying oils, lining the eyes, arranging the hair or wig, and dressing in linen, can be observed from early dynastic periods through the height of the New Kingdom. Few civilizations maintained such long-lasting visual traditions. This consistency reflects the Egyptian admiration for stability and continuity. When something worked well and symbolized order, it was preserved rather than constantly reinvented. In the quiet moments of daily life, these routines must have felt ordinary. Someone might sit beside a small mirror, dip an applicator into a jar of kohl, and carefully trace the line along the eyelid. Another person might rub scented oil into the skin after bathing in cool water drawn from the Nile. These were simple actions, repeated countless times across generations. Yet together they formed a cultural tradition strong enough to leave its mark on history. Today, when modern viewers recognize the dramatic black-lined eyes and elegant presentation of ancient Egyptians, they are seeing the visible result of these deeply rooted habits. What appears at first glance to be a distinctive artistic style was actually built from thousands of quiet daily rituals. Through washing, grooming, fragrance, and adornment, the people of ancient Egypt expressed their belief that beauty, order, and dignity belonged not only to kings and temples, but also to the ordinary rhythms of everyday life along the Nile. Archaeologists have also discovered evidence that cosmetics could serve protective and medicinal roles. The minerals used in eye cosmetics may have helped reduce the risk of certain eye infections common in dusty environments. Oils and ointments protected the skin from the drying effects of sun and wind. In this way, the Egyptian beauty routine worked as a form of environmental adaptation. It was both aesthetic and practical, shaped by the realities of life in a desert landscape. Another fascinating detail appears in Egyptian writing and poetry. Some ancient texts describe beauty using language connected to light, fragrance, and balance. A well-groomed person might be compared to the glow of the sun at sunrise or the freshness of blooming flowers along the Nile. These metaphors show that beauty was understood not only visually but also emotionally and symbolically. A pleasant appearance reflected inner harmony and the blessings of a stable life. When we look back at the long history of Egypt, stretching across more than 3,000 years, the persistence of these beauty traditions becomes truly remarkable. Civilizations rose and fell across the ancient world, yet Egyptian grooming habits remained recognizable from one dynasty to another. The tools might change slightly, the perfumes might vary, and jewelry styles might evolve, but the core routine stayed familiar. In the quiet privacy of homes along the Nile, people continued to wash, apply oils, line their eyes, and arrange their hair just as their ancestors had done centuries earlier. These routines were not written in official records or carved into temple walls as grand achievements. Yet they were repeated every single day, shaping the visual identity of one of the world's longest-lasting civilizations. And perhaps that is what makes the ancient Egyptian beauty routine so captivating today. It reminds us that history is not only made by kings, wars, and monuments. It is also made in small daily rituals. The moment someone looks into a mirror, lifts a cosmetic applicator, and carefully prepares their face to meet the world beyond the door. As Egyptian civilization moved toward its later centuries, the daily routines of beauty and grooming remained woven into the fabric of ordinary life. Even as foreign influences entered Egypt during the Persian, Greek, and Roman periods, the familiar practices of washing, perfuming, and applying cosmetics continued much as they had for generations. Travelers from other parts of the Mediterranean often remarked on the distinctive appearance of Egyptians, particularly the carefully outlined eyes and the emphasis on cleanliness. To outsiders, these habits sometimes seemed unusual, but within Egypt they represented normal, respectable behavior. One reason these traditions endured so strongly was the deep Egyptian respect for routine. Life along the Nile followed a predictable rhythm shaped by the annual flooding of the river. Crops were planted, harvested, and stored according to this cycle. Religious festivals followed the calendar of the gods. In the same way, personal care followed familiar patterns repeated each morning and evening. Routine created stability, and stability was something Egyptian culture valued deeply. Morning preparation often began with washing the body. In homes that could afford it, water was poured from jars over basins while servants assisted with towels and oils. In more modest households, individuals performed these tasks themselves, using simple containers and cloths. After washing, scented oils were rubbed gently into the skin to restore moisture lost in the dry climate. These oils left a subtle shine and a faint fragrance that lingered throughout the day. Next came the application of cosmetics. The small cosmetic jars discovered by archaeologists show that people kept their pigments carefully sealed to prevent contamination from dust and heat. A cosmetic stick or thin applicator would be dipped into the kohl mixture and then drawn along the eyelid with a steady hand. Achieving the smooth almond shape required patience and familiarity with the tools. Over time, the process likely became almost automatic, performed with the same quiet confidence as tying a garment or fastening jewelry. Mirrors played an essential role in this stage of preparation. Though made of polished metal rather than glass, Egyptian mirrors could reflect the face clearly when held in the light. The handles, often shaped like lotus stems or papyrus plants, reminded the user of Egypt's natural landscape and the symbolism attached to these sacred plants. Holding such a mirror connected everyday grooming with the deeper cultural imagery surrounding rebirth, growth, and renewal. After cosmetics were applied, hair or wigs were arranged. A person who wore a wig would carefully place it over the shaved or closely trimmed scalp and adjust it so that the strands fell evenly around the face and shoulders. Some wigs were lightly scented or treated with oils to keep them flexible. Combs made of wood or bone helped smooth the hair into place. Once the wig or hairstyle was arranged properly, the final appearance began to take shape. Clothing followed. Fresh linen garments, cleaned and sometimes lightly starched, were wrapped or tied around the body. Linen's pale color reflected sunlight and kept the wearer cool during the hottest parts of the day. The smooth texture of the fabric complemented the oils and perfumes applied earlier, creating an overall sense of neatness and comfort. For wealthier individuals, pleated linen garments added an extra level of elegance, with delicate folds that moved gracefully as the person walked. Jewelry provided the finishing touch. Rings, bracelets, necklaces, and amulets were carefully chosen to match the occasion. Some pieces were purely decorative, while others carried symbolic meaning. Amulets shaped like scarabs, eyes, or protective deities were believed to offer spiritual protection to the wearer. In this way, beauty and belief were closely connected. The body became both a canvas for decoration and a place where symbols of protection could be displayed. The day might then continue with work, social gatherings, or religious activity, but the careful preparation of the morning created a foundation for everything that followed. A well-groomed appearance communicated readiness and respect. It showed that the individual had taken time to present themselves properly before entering the public world. Even in the evening, aspects of the beauty routine continued. After returning home, individuals might wash again to remove dust and sweat accumulated during the day. Oils could be reapplied to soothe the skin, and wigs might be removed and carefully stored. Cosmetic containers were closed and placed back in chests or baskets to protect them until the next morning. These small actions preserved both the tools and the habits that had become part of daily life. Across centuries, these quiet routines helped create the recognizable visual identity of ancient Egypt. When modern viewers admire the painted eyes and composed expressions in Egyptian statues and murals, they are seeing the final result of countless mornings spent preparing the body with care. The beauty of ancient Egypt was not created suddenly in moments of ceremony or celebration. It was built slowly day after day through ordinary acts of washing, grooming, and attention to detail. In the end, the ancient Egyptian beauty routine tells us something universal about human culture. Across time and geography, people have always found ways to care for their bodies, express identity, and connect personal appearance with deeper values. Along the banks of the Nile, these habits developed into one of the most recognizable and enduring beauty traditions in history, a tradition shaped by climate, belief, artistry, and the quiet discipline of everyday life. As centuries passed and Egypt gradually moved into the eras influenced by Greek and later Roman rule, the ancient beauty traditions did not disappear. Instead, they adapted carefully while preserving many of their older foundations. Greek settlers who arrived after the conquests of Alexander the Great encountered a society where grooming and cosmetics had already been refined for thousands of years. Rather than replacing these traditions entirely, many foreign residents adopted elements of Egyptian beauty culture themselves. The familiar dark-lined eyes, scented oils, and carefully arranged hair remained visible throughout cities such as Alexandria and Memphis. Greek and Roman writers occasionally described Egyptian grooming habits with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. They noted the frequent bathing, the use of perfumes, and the careful attention given to appearance. For visitors arriving from other regions of the Mediterranean, Egyptian standards of cleanliness could appear unusually disciplined. The climate likely played an important role in this reputation. In the heat of the Nile Valley, washing and applying oils were not merely cosmetic choices but practical responses to the environment. In urban centers like Alexandria, which became one of the largest cities of the ancient world, beauty culture also began to reflect a blending of traditions. Egyptian cosmetics were still used, but Greek hairstyles, clothing styles, and decorative techniques slowly appeared alongside them. Women might wear linen garments in Egyptian fashion while arranging their hair in ways inspired by Greek styles. Jewelry designs could incorporate Egyptian symbols such as the lotus or scarab, while also reflecting Mediterranean artistic influences. This cultural exchange created a new layer of diversity within the long-established Egyptian routine of personal care. Despite these outside influences, the traditional emphasis on eye cosmetics remained especially strong. Kohl continued to be applied along the eyelids in the same elongated style that had been used for centuries. This continuity was remarkable. Even as political control of Egypt shifted between dynasties and foreign rulers, the familiar image of the Egyptian eye remained one of the most stable visual elements of daily life. In tomb portraits from the later periods, the same careful lines appear, connecting individuals separated by hundreds or even thousands of years. Perfume culture also expanded during this time. Alexandria became an important center for the production and trade of fragrances. Skilled artisans experimented with blending oils, resins, and flowers to produce new scents that could be sold throughout the Mediterranean world. Egyptian perfumers developed reputations for creating rich and lasting fragrances, often stored in elegant glass or alabaster containers. These perfumes were valued not only for personal use but also as luxury trade goods. Even within these changing circumstances, the older Egyptian idea that beauty was connected to harmony and balance continued to guide everyday habits. Grooming was still associated with cleanliness, dignity, and the maintenance of social order. The tools of beauty, mirrors, combs, cosmetic jars, and perfume bottles remained common household objects. Their presence in archaeological discoveries shows that personal care continued to be an expected part of life. Another aspect that endured was the connection between beauty and the afterlife. Even during the later periods of Egyptian history, individuals were buried with cosmetic items, jewelry, and grooming tools. These objects were intended to accompany the deceased into the next world, where they could continue the same routines of care and presentation. The belief that the body should remain complete and well-prepared extended beyond life itself, reinforcing the cultural importance of appearance. When historians and archaeologists study these cosmetic tools today, they often find traces of pigments and oils still preserved inside ancient containers. These tiny remnants offer a direct link to the daily lives of people who lived thousands of years ago. A small jar of kohl or a spoon used for ointment becomes more than an artifact. It becomes evidence of a personal moment, someone preparing their face before stepping outside into the bright Egyptian sun. Over time, the political independence of Egypt faded as the Roman Empire absorbed the region more fully. Yet even within Roman rule, Egyptian visual traditions continued to influence local culture. Portraits from the Roman period, especially the famous Fayum mummy portraits, show individuals with large, carefully defined eyes and composed expressions. While painted in a style influenced by Greek realism, these faces still echo the older Egyptian focus on the eyes as a central feature of beauty. Looking back across the entire span of ancient Egyptian history, it becomes clear that the beauty routine was never a simple matter of decoration. It reflected how Egyptians understood their relationship with the world around them. The desert climate encouraged protective oils and cosmetics. Religious beliefs emphasized purity and balance. artistic traditions shaped the ideal appearance of the human face. Trade networks brought exotic materials that expanded the range of perfumes and jewelry. All of these elements combined to form a routine that was both practical and symbolic. When an Egyptian man or woman lined their eyes with kohl, applied scented oil, and dressed in clean linen, they were participating in a tradition that had developed over countless generations. Each small action connected them to the wider rhythm of Egyptian civilization. And perhaps that is the most fascinating part of this story. Behind the towering pyramids, the vast temples, and the statues of kings and queens, everyday life continued in quiet, familiar ways. People woke each morning, washed away the dust of the previous day, prepared their appearance, and stepped into the sunlight along the Nile. Through these simple acts of care, the beauty of ancient Egypt was renewed again and again, not in grand monuments, but in the steady rituals of ordinary life. As the long history of ancient Egypt gradually came to its close under Roman rule, many of the traditions that had shaped Egyptian daily life for millennia continued quietly among the people. Empires rose and fell, rulers changed, and new languages began to appear in administration and trade. Yet the ordinary habits of grooming and personal care remained familiar along the banks of the Nile. The same desert sun still rose each morning. The same river continued its steady flow, and people still prepared themselves for the day using routines passed down through generations. In homes throughout towns and villages, the tools of beauty remained simple but meaningful. A small mirror of polished metal might rest inside a wooden chest. Nearby could sit a narrow jar containing kohl, carefully sealed to protect the dark powder inside. A small applicator stick, worn smooth from years of use, waited beside it. These objects were not grand treasures, yet they held quiet importance. They were part of the daily rhythm that connected individuals to the cultural traditions of their ancestors. The act of applying eye cosmetics likely remained one of the most recognizable parts of the Egyptian beauty routine. Even as new influences entered Egypt through contact with the wider Mediterranean world, the familiar dark line along the eyelid continued to define the Egyptian face. This visual signature had survived for thousands of years, and it still carried echoes of the beliefs that first inspired it: protection from the harsh sunlight, defense against dust and irritation, and symbolic connection to the sacred eye of Horus. Perfumes and oils also continued to play their role in everyday grooming. The warm Egyptian climate made scented oils both practical and pleasant. When rubbed gently into the skin, these oils restored moisture lost to the dry air and left behind a faint fragrance that lingered throughout the day. In social gatherings, the presence of subtle perfume may have created a shared atmosphere of refinement and comfort. Even modest homes might contain a small jar of oil infused with herbs or flowers. Linen clothing remained central to Egyptian presentation as well. For thousands of years, linen had been valued for its coolness and cleanliness. The fabric reflected sunlight and allowed air to circulate freely around the body. After washing and applying oils, dressing in clean linen garments completed the feeling of freshness that Egyptians associated with proper grooming. The soft folds of linen moved naturally with the body, creating an appearance that was both practical and elegant. Jewelry continued to provide color and symbolism. Even simple necklaces made from beads or colored stones added contrast against the pale linen fabric. Amulets shaped like protective symbols, such as scarabs, eyes, or small figures of deities, were often worn close to the body. These items carried meaning beyond decoration. They served as reminders of the spiritual forces believed to guide and protect daily life. By this time in history, Egyptian culture had already lasted longer than many civilizations that followed it. The beauty routines practiced by people living under Roman rule were, in many ways, the descendants of habits that had begun thousands of years earlier during the earliest dynasties. The continuity of these traditions demonstrates how deeply rooted they had become within Egyptian identity. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal traces of these routines even today. Cosmetic containers recovered from tombs still carry faint residues of pigments and oils. Combs and mirrors lie beside jewelry and clothing, preserved within burial chambers where they were placed to accompany the dead into the afterlife. These objects offer quiet evidence that grooming and beauty were considered essential parts of human life, worthy of continuing beyond death itself. For the Egyptians, appearance was closely connected to the idea of order. A well-prepared body reflected discipline, respect, and harmony with the world. The concept of ma'at, the principle of balance and proper order, extended into everyday habits. Washing the body, arranging the hair, applying cosmetics, and wearing clean garments were all small acts that contributed to maintaining this sense of balance. This cultural perspective explains why Egyptian beauty routines remained so consistent across centuries. They were not driven by rapidly changing trends or seasonal fashions. Instead, they followed stable ideals rooted in religion, environment, and social structure. Beauty was understood as calm, composed, and balanced rather than dramatic or constantly evolving. When modern audiences imagine ancient Egypt, the visual image that often appears is remarkably clear. A serene face, outlined eyes, smooth skin, and carefully arranged hair framed by elegant jewelry. This image did not emerge from artistic imagination alone. It was shaped by the daily routines of millions of people who lived along the Nile across thousands of years. Every morning, someone might sit quietly beside a small mirror. They would dip an applicator into dark kohl, carefully draw the line along the eyelid, smooth scented oil into the skin, and adjust their linen garments before stepping into the daylight. These small moments were repeated again and again across villages, cities, and royal courts alike. Through these simple acts, the beauty of ancient Egypt was continually renewed. It was not preserved only in monuments or temples, but in the ordinary habits of everyday life. And that may be the most enduring legacy of the ancient Egyptian beauty routine. A reminder that even within one of history's greatest civilizations, beauty was created not only through grand achievements, but through the quiet rituals that began each new day along the timeless waters of the Nile. As we reflect on the long arc of Egyptian history, the beauty routine that once began in small households along the Nile becomes something more than a simple habit. It becomes a thread connecting thousands of years of human experience. Long before modern cosmetics, salons, or skincare industries existed, the people of ancient Egypt had already developed a thoughtful system of personal care that balanced practicality, artistry, and belief. What is especially remarkable is how ordinary these routines must have felt to the people who practiced them. For an Egyptian living in a riverside town, grooming was simply part of beginning the day. The process likely unfolded slowly and quietly. A basin of water might be poured for washing. A cloth could be used to remove the dust of yesterday's work. Oils were rubbed into the skin to soften it against the dry air. The face was prepared carefully, and the eyes outlined with practiced precision. There was no sense that these actions would one day fascinate historians thousands of years in the future. At the time, they were simply part of daily life. Yet these simple habits left an extraordinary mark on history. Because Egyptians valued stability and tradition, the same visual style continued across many centuries. When artists carved statues or painted tomb walls, they often depicted people with the same calm expression, the same defined eyes, and the same balanced posture. These artistic conventions reflected what Egyptians believed the ideal human appearance should be: orderly, composed, and harmonious. The emphasis on harmony extended beyond the body itself. In Egyptian thought, the physical world was part of a greater cosmic balance. Maintaining that balance required attention to both spiritual and everyday responsibilities. Preparing the body carefully each day could therefore be understood as a small act that supported this larger order. Cleanliness, fragrance, and grooming were signs that a person respected the structure of the world around them. This idea helps explain why cosmetics and grooming tools were often placed inside tombs. Egyptians believed that life would continue in another realm after death. To ensure comfort and completeness in that world, the deceased needed the same objects they had used during life. Mirrors, cosmetic jars, combs, and jewelry were therefore placed beside the body. These items allowed the individual to maintain the same habits of care in the afterlife. When archaeologists open ancient burial chambers today, they sometimes find these objects still resting where they were placed thousands of years ago. A small jar might still hold traces of dark pigment used for eye cosmetics. A delicate spoon may still carry the faint scent of oils once used for perfume. These discoveries remind us that history is preserved not only through monuments but also through the personal belongings of ordinary people. The Egyptian beauty routine also tells us something about how humans adapt to their environment. The climate of the Nile Valley encouraged habits that protected the body from heat, dryness, and dust. Oils helped maintain healthy skin. Eye cosmetics reduced glare from intense sunlight. Linen garments kept the body cool. What began as practical solutions gradually developed into recognizable cultural traditions. Over time, these traditions became one of the most distinctive visual signatures of the ancient world. Even today, when we see an image inspired by Egypt, the dark-lined eyes and elegant presentation are instantly recognizable. This powerful visual identity has survived through art, literature, and popular culture for thousands of years. But behind that familiar image lies a much quieter reality. The beauty of ancient Egypt was not created in a single moment or by a single ruler. It emerged slowly through countless daily routines practiced by farmers, craftsmen, priests, nobles, and queens alike. Each morning someone prepared their appearance with care, and through that repetition the culture of beauty was preserved. In the end, the story of the ancient Egyptian beauty routine is not only about cosmetics or fashion. It is about the human desire to care for the body, to present oneself with dignity, and to live in harmony with the surrounding world. Along the banks of the Nile, these desires took shape in a tradition that lasted longer than almost any other in recorded history. And so when we look at the statues and painted faces that remain from ancient Egypt, we are not simply seeing the style of a distant civilization. We are seeing the result of quiet daily rituals, small moments of care repeated across centuries, forming a timeless portrait of how people once prepared themselves to meet the day beneath the bright Egyptian sun. When we step back and look at the full picture, the ancient Egyptian beauty routine begins to reveal something deeper than appearance alone. It reflects how an entire civilization understood the relationship between the body, the environment, and the larger order of the world. In Egypt, beauty was not separated from daily life. It was woven quietly into the rhythm of the morning, the preparation for work, and the rituals that connected people to both society and the divine. Imagine an ordinary morning along the Nile several thousand years ago. The first light of the sun spreads across the river, reflecting softly against the walls of mud brick houses. The air is still cool before the heat of the day begins to rise. Inside a home, someone prepares for the day in a familiar and practiced way. Water is poured gently over the hands and face. The dust and dryness of the previous day are washed away. After washing, a small jar of oil might be opened. The oil is rubbed carefully into the skin, restoring softness and leaving behind a faint fragrance. In a climate where the sun could quickly dry and irritate the skin, this simple act made daily life more comfortable. The scent of the oil also created a quiet sense of refinement, something that Egyptians valued greatly. Next comes the mirror, a polished disc of bronze or copper, catching the early sunlight as it reflects the face. Nearby sits a narrow container filled with dark kohl. The applicator stick is dipped into the pigment and lifted slowly toward the eye. With a steady hand, the cosmetic line is drawn along the eyelid, extending outward toward the temple in the familiar almond shape that has become one of the most recognizable features of Egyptian art. This moment, repeated across countless generations, helped define the visual identity of ancient Egypt. Once the cosmetics are applied, the rest of the routine continues. Hair is arranged or a wig is placed carefully over the head. The wig may be lightly scented, carrying the fragrance of oils or herbs. A comb smooths the strands into place. Then linen garments are wrapped around the body, clean and cool against the skin. Linen, made from flax grown along the Nile, was one of Egypt's most practical and valued fabrics. Jewelry may be added next. Perhaps a necklace of beads, a bracelet of gold or faience, or a small protective amulet worn close to the chest. These pieces were not only decorative. Many carried symbolic meaning, offering protection or reminding the wearer of divine forces believed to guide daily life. When the routine is finished, the individual is ready to step outside into the bright Egyptian sunlight. What makes this routine so fascinating is its consistency. For thousands of years, Egyptians followed remarkably similar habits of grooming and presentation. While other cultures often experienced rapid changes in fashion, Egyptian ideals remained steady. Beauty was associated with balance, order, and calm expression. The goal was not constant reinvention, but the preservation of harmony. This stability reflected a larger cultural philosophy. The Egyptians believed in maintaining ma'at, a principle that represented truth, balance, and cosmic order. Living according to ma'at meant keeping both the world and oneself in proper condition. Grooming the body carefully was therefore part of maintaining this sense of order. A well-prepared appearance signaled respect, not only for oneself but for society and the gods. The connection between beauty and spirituality can also be seen in Egyptian temples. Priests were required to follow strict rules of cleanliness before performing sacred rituals. They bathed frequently, shaved their bodies, and wore pure linen garments. These practices reinforced the belief that physical purity supported spiritual balance. Even after death, the Egyptian commitment to personal care continued. Tombs often contained mirrors, combs, cosmetic jars, and jewelry placed beside the body. The deceased was expected to live again in another realm, and these familiar objects ensured that the routines of grooming and beauty could continue in the afterlife. When archaeologists uncover these items today, they offer a rare glimpse into the private lives of ancient people. A small cosmetic jar or worn mirror tells a quiet story, not of kings or battles, but of everyday life. And perhaps that is what makes the ancient Egyptian beauty routine so compelling. Behind the monumental pyramids and vast temples existed a civilization sustained by small, repeated acts of care. Each morning, people washed, applied oils, lined their eyes, and arranged their clothing before beginning the day. Through these simple rituals, beauty became part of the structure of life itself. The statues and painted portraits that survive from ancient Egypt still carry the visual imprint of these habits. The defined eyes, smooth skin, and composed expressions that appear in Egyptian art are not simply artistic choices. They reflect the result of daily routines practiced by millions of people over thousands of years. In the end, the beauty of ancient Egypt was not created only in royal courts or sacred temples. As the centuries passed and the ancient world slowly transformed, the visual memory of Egyptian beauty continued to endure far beyond the civilization that created it. Even after the temples grew quiet and the old dynasties faded into history, the distinctive style of Egyptian grooming remained one of the most recognizable cultural images ever produced. The carefully outlined eyes, the calm and balanced expression, the smooth skin framed by jewelry and linen. These features had become a lasting symbol of Egyptian identity. Part of this endurance comes from the remarkable stability of Egyptian culture itself. For more than 3,000 years, generations of people lived along the same river, worked the same fertile soil, and followed many of the same customs. While political power shifted and new rulers appeared, daily life remained surprisingly consistent. Farmers still woke early to tend the fields. Craftsmen still shaped stone, wood, and metal into useful objects. And in homes across the Nile Valley, individuals still began the day with the familiar rituals of washing, grooming, and preparing their appearance. These routines were quiet and personal, yet they connected individuals to something larger than themselves. Preparing the body was a way of aligning with the wider order of Egyptian society. A person who appeared clean, balanced, and composed demonstrated respect for the cultural values shared by their community. In this way, beauty became part of the social fabric that helped keep Egyptian life stable over long periods of time. The tools used in these routines were often simple, but they were crafted with care. Mirrors of polished bronze were shaped so they could be comfortably held in the hand. Cosmetic containers were carved from alabaster, stone, or clay to keep pigments and oils safe from the harsh desert environment. Combs were cut from bone or wood, their teeth carefully spaced to smooth hair or wigs. Even small cosmetic spoons could be decorated with artistic designs, showing swimmers, animals, or lotus flowers. These objects remind us that beauty routines were not rushed or careless activities. They were moments of attention and patience. Grinding minerals to produce eye cosmetics required time and skill. Mixing oils and perfumes demanded knowledge of plants and resins. Arranging hair or wigs took practice and care. Through these actions, ordinary individuals participated in traditions that had been passed down for centuries. Another reason Egyptian beauty culture endured so long was its connection to the environment. The desert climate strongly influenced the development of grooming habits. Oils protected the skin from dryness and cracking. Eye cosmetics helped reduce glare from intense sunlight reflecting off sand and water. Linen clothing allowed the body to remain cool even in extreme heat. These practical benefits helped ensure that beauty routines were not simply decorative but genuinely useful in daily life. Religion also strengthened these habits. The Egyptian worldview emphasized harmony between the human world and the divine order. Maintaining cleanliness and personal balance reflected respect for that order. Priests followed especially strict grooming rules before entering temples, but similar ideas influenced society as a whole. Caring for the body was seen as part of living in accordance with the principles that sustain the universe. Even in the afterlife, these beliefs continued. Egyptians imagined the next world as a place where life would carry on in familiar ways. To ensure comfort and completeness, the dead were buried with many of the objects they had used during life. Mirrors, cosmetic jars, jewelry, and combs were carefully placed inside tombs, so the individual could continue preparing their appearance beyond death. Today, when archaeologists uncover these objects, they reveal something deeply human about the past. A small jar containing traces of ancient kohl may seem insignificant compared with towering monuments, yet it tells a powerful story. It reminds us that history is made not only by kings and battles but also by the daily routines of ordinary people. Through these small objects, we can imagine someone living thousands of years ago preparing for the day just as we do now. They would wash their face, smooth oil into their skin, carefully outline their eyes, and adjust their clothing before stepping outside into the sunlight. These quiet actions, repeated across generations, created the recognizable beauty of ancient Egypt. And that beauty still speaks to us today. It appears in museum displays, in historical reconstructions, and in the countless artistic images inspired by Egyptian culture. The dramatic eyes and composed expressions remain powerful symbols, instantly connecting modern viewers with a civilization that flourished along the Nile long ago. Yet behind those famous images lies a simple truth. The beauty of ancient Egypt was not created in a single moment of brilliance. It was built slowly, day after day, through the steady rhythm of ordinary life. Each morning someone lifted a mirror, applied a touch of pigment, and prepared themselves to greet the light of another Egyptian day. As we reach the final stretch of this journey into the ancient Egyptian beauty routine, what becomes most striking is how deeply these habits were woven into the identity of the civilization itself. For the Egyptians, caring for the body was never isolated from the broader patterns of life. It existed alongside agriculture, religion, family traditions, and social order. Grooming was simply another part of living in harmony with the world around them. Along the Nile, daily life followed a rhythm shaped by nature. The river flooded, fields were planted, harvests were gathered, and communities moved steadily through the seasons. Within this predictable cycle, personal routines also found their place. Morning preparation became a moment of calm before the activity of the day. It was a time when individuals could restore themselves physically and mentally, preparing to participate in the wider life of their community. This sense of order is one of the defining characteristics of Egyptian culture. The concept of ma'at, balance, truth, and harmony, guided how people understood their responsibilities to the world. Maintaining that balance required attention not only to large rituals in temples but also to the smaller details of everyday behavior. Cleanliness, grooming, and presentation reflected respect for oneself, and for the social structure that surrounded each individual. Because of this cultural perspective, beauty routines remained surprisingly stable across long periods of time. While other ancient societies experienced frequent shifts in fashion and style, Egyptian ideals of appearance changed only gradually. The almond-shaped eyeline, the smooth skin, the careful use of oils and perfumes, and the elegant linen garments all remained familiar features for centuries. The environment played a powerful role in reinforcing this consistency. The Nile Valley offered fertile land, but beyond it stretched wide deserts where the sun could be harsh and unforgiving. In such conditions, practical solutions often became lasting traditions. Oils protected the skin from dryness. Cosmetics shielded against glare and dust. Linen clothing helped keep the body cool. These solutions were effective, and because they worked well, they continued to be used generation after generation. At the same time, Egyptian beauty routines allowed individuals to express identity and social belonging. A noble official attending a ceremony would appear in finely pleated linen, elaborate jewelry, and carefully applied cosmetics. A craftsman preparing for work might follow the same general habits, but with simpler tools and materials. The underlying routine remained recognizable, even when the details differed. The tools themselves reveal much about the value Egyptians placed on personal care. Cosmetic containers were often beautifully carved from alabaster or stone. Small spoons used for ointments were shaped with artistic designs. Mirrors were crafted from polished metal and sometimes decorated with symbolic handles resembling lotus flowers or papyrus plants. These objects show that grooming was not rushed or careless. It was a moment of attention that deserved well-made instruments. The presence of these items in tombs is particularly telling. Egyptians believed that life would continue after death, and therefore the body needed to remain complete and prepared. By placing mirrors, combs, cosmetic jars, and jewelry in burial chambers, families ensured that their loved ones could continue familiar routines in the next world. This belief highlights how central grooming had become to Egyptian ideas about dignity and completeness. When archaeologists study these objects today, they uncover small but meaningful traces of the past. A jar containing ancient kohl might still show the dark residue of the pigment used thousands of years ago. A comb may still carry the marks of wear from daily use. These details offer glimpses into the personal lives of individuals who lived long before written history recorded their names. What makes these discoveries especially powerful is how relatable they feel. Across time and cultures, people share the desire to care for their bodies and present themselves well to others. Though the tools and materials may change, the intention remains familiar. In this way, the ancient Egyptian beauty routine connects the distant past with the present. Even today, the visual style created by these routines continues to influence art and design. The dramatic lined eyes, the balanced facial proportions, and the elegant presentation of hair and jewelry remain powerful images recognized around the world. Museums display Egyptian artifacts that still captivate visitors thousands of years after they were created. Yet the true story behind these images is quieter than the statues and monuments might suggest. Egyptian beauty was not shaped by a single moment of creativity or a single famous individual. It was built slowly through daily repetition. Every morning, someone somewhere along the Nile followed the same familiar steps. Washing, applying oils, outlining the eyes, arranging clothing, and preparing to step outside into the bright desert light. Through these repeated actions, a culture of beauty emerged that would last longer than most civilizations themselves. In the end, the ancient Egyptian beauty routine tells us something simple yet profound. Beneath the grandeur of pyramids and temples existed ordinary lives filled with small rituals of care. These rituals were not grand or dramatic, but they were steady, meaningful, and shared by countless people across generations. And in those quiet moments of preparation, standing before a polished mirror, tracing the dark line of kohl along the eyelid, smoothing linen against the skin, the timeless elegance of ancient Egypt came to life again and again beside the flowing waters of the Nile. By the time the ancient world began to shift toward the early centuries of the Common Era, Egypt had already lived through a span of history almost unimaginable in length. Dynasties had risen and fallen, foreign rulers had come and gone, and the political structure of the region had changed many times. Yet when it came to personal care and beauty, the everyday habits of Egyptians still carried the quiet echo of traditions that stretched far back into the earliest days of the civilization. In towns scattered along the Nile, life continued to revolve around familiar routines. Markets opened in the morning, fishermen worked along the riverbanks, and farmers walked out toward the fields as the sun rose higher into the sky. Before joining these activities, many people still followed the simple practices that had defined Egyptian grooming for centuries. The day often began with washing. Even in modest homes, water was an important part of daily cleanliness. The Nile provided a constant source, and smaller canals and wells supplied communities across the valley. Washing the face and hands helped remove dust carried by desert winds, refreshing the body before the heat of the day grew stronger. Cleanliness was not only comfortable in such a climate, it was also associated with dignity and proper living. After washing, oils were frequently applied to the skin. These oils helped protect against dryness and irritation, leaving the skin softer and more resilient in the harsh sunlight. The scents infused into these oils, sometimes drawn from herbs, flowers, or resins, added a subtle fragrance that accompanied a person throughout the day. Even a faint aroma could create a sense of calm refinement in busy streets or crowded gatherings. The application of eye cosmetics continued to remain one of the most distinctive features of Egyptian appearance. Small jars of kohl were still used to create the dark line along the eyelids that had become a visual hallmark of the culture. The act itself required patience and a steady hand. The cosmetic stick would be dipped gently into the pigment, and the line carefully drawn outward from the inner corner of the eye toward the temple. This shape was more than decorative. It had been developed over generations to reduce glare from the bright Egyptian sun and to protect the delicate skin around the eyes. Over time, it also became deeply symbolic. The painted eye reflected the sacred imagery of protection found in Egyptian religion, echoing the powerful eye of Horus that represented healing and watchfulness. Hair and wigs were then arranged as part of the routine. For those who wore wigs, careful placement ensured that the strands fell evenly around the face. Combs made from bone or wood smoothed the hair into place. In some households, wigs might be lightly scented with oils, allowing fragrance to linger subtly as the person moved through the day. Clothing followed. Linen remained the most common and valued fabric, appreciated for its ability to remain cool in the Egyptian heat. Fresh linen garments created a feeling of cleanliness that matched the earlier stages of washing and grooming. The pale color of the fabric also reflected sunlight, helping the wearer remain comfortable even during long hours outdoors. Jewelry completed the final stage of preparation. Necklaces, bracelets, rings, and small amulets were selected depending on the occasion. Some individuals wore simple bead necklaces, while wealthier members of society displayed elaborate gold pieces or colored stones. Many pieces carried protective symbolism, reminding the wearer of the divine forces believed to guard human life. With these steps completed, the person was ready to step out into the rhythm of Egyptian society. What is remarkable is how familiar these moments feel even today. Though separated by thousands of years, the process of preparing oneself for the day remains a universal human experience. Washing, grooming, dressing, and adjusting small details of appearance are rituals shared across cultures and eras. For the ancient Egyptians, however, these routines held an added layer of meaning. They were expressions of harmony with the world. To appear balanced, clean, and composed reflected an inner alignment with Ma'at, the principle that represented order and truth within the universe. This belief helped explain why beauty routines remained so consistent across generations. They were not simply matters of fashion that could change quickly. Instead, they were part of a cultural framework that valued continuity and stability. Even in death, this connection remained visible. Tombs often contained mirrors, cosmetic containers, combs, and jewelry placed carefully beside the deceased. These items ensured that the individual would continue the familiar rituals of grooming in the next life. The afterlife, in Egyptian belief, was not an abstract spiritual realm but a continuation of existence where daily life could carry on. Today, when archaeologists uncover these objects, they reveal a deeply human story hidden within ancient artifacts. A small jar of kohl, a polished mirror, or a carved cosmetic spoon offers evidence of the quiet moments that shaped everyday life in Egypt. Through these objects, we can imagine someone living long ago standing beside a window or doorway as sunlight enters the room. They lift a mirror, trace the familiar line along the eyelid, smooth oil into the skin, and prepare to begin another day along the banks of the Nile. And in that simple moment, repeated countless times across centuries, the timeless beauty of ancient Egypt quietly continued. As the story of ancient Egyptian beauty reaches its quiet conclusion, it becomes clear that what we often recognize today as a distinctive style was actually the result of something much more ordinary. It was the outcome of countless daily rituals repeated over generations. The elegant images preserved in statues, tomb paintings, and carved reliefs were not simply artistic inventions. They reflected real habits practiced every morning by people who lived along the Nile thousands of years ago. When we picture ancient Egypt, we often imagine vast pyramids rising from the desert, towering temples carved with hieroglyphs, and statues of kings and queens gazing calmly into the distance. These monumental creations dominate the story of the civilization. Yet behind them existed a quieter world of everyday life. In homes made of mud brick, in villages near the fields, and in bustling towns beside the river, individuals followed routines that helped them prepare for the day. Those routines began with simple acts of care. Washing the face and body removed the dust carried by desert winds. Oils softened the skin and protected it from the dryness of the climate. Cosmetics were applied with practiced precision, especially the familiar dark line of kohl drawn along the eyes. Hair or wigs were arranged, linen garments were wrapped neatly around the body, and jewelry or amulets were chosen to complete the appearance. Each step was small, but together they formed a routine that became one of the most recognizable visual traditions in human history. What makes the Egyptian beauty routine especially remarkable is its stability. For more than 3,000 years, the same general approach to grooming continued with only gradual changes. While other societies often saw rapid shifts in fashion or style, Egyptian ideals of appearance remained centered on balance, simplicity, and harmony. Smooth skin, defined eyes, clean linen, and careful adornment formed the foundation of this enduring aesthetic. This stability reflected the broader values of Egyptian civilization. Egyptians believed that the world functioned best when balance and order were maintained. The concept known as Ma'at represented this idea of harmony in the universe. Living in accordance with Ma'at meant behaving responsibly, respecting social roles, and maintaining both physical and spiritual cleanliness. In this cultural context, caring for the body was not merely about looking attractive. It was a reflection of discipline and respect for the natural order of life. A person who appeared clean, balanced, and composed demonstrated that they were living properly within their society. The environment also played a powerful role in shaping these habits. Life in the Nile Valley meant dealing with intense sunlight, dry air, and drifting sand. Oils helped prevent skin from cracking in the heat. Cosmetics reduced glare from the bright landscape. Linen clothing kept the body cool and comfortable. These practical solutions gradually evolved into traditions that carried aesthetic and symbolic meaning as well. Another reason these routines endured for so long was the strong Egyptian respect for continuity. Cultural practices were passed carefully from one generation to the next. Children learned grooming habits from parents and elders, just as they learned farming techniques, craft skills, and religious customs. Over time, these shared habits created a sense of identity that linked individuals to their ancestors. Even in death, the importance of personal care remained visible. Egyptians believed that life would continue in the afterlife, and therefore the body should remain complete and prepared. Tombs often contained mirrors, combs, cosmetic containers, and jewelry placed beside the deceased. These objects ensured that familiar routines of grooming could continue beyond death. For modern historians and archaeologists, these artifacts offer valuable insights into daily life. A small cosmetic jar found in a tomb may still hold traces of pigment used thousands of years ago. A comb worn smooth by years of use reveals the ordinary human activities that once filled ancient homes. Through such discoveries, the distant past becomes surprisingly relatable. What we see in these objects is not only the style of an ancient culture, but also the shared human desire to care for the body and present oneself with dignity. Across time and geography, people have always developed rituals of grooming and personal appearance. The tools may change, but the intention remains familiar. In the case of ancient Egypt, those rituals produced one of the most enduring images in history. The lined eyes, calm expressions, and elegant presentation preserved in Egyptian art continue to capture the imagination of people around the world. Yet behind that iconic image lies a simple truth. The beauty of ancient Egypt was not created by a single invention or a single moment of creativity. It emerged gradually through daily repetition. Every morning someone looked into a polished mirror, dipped an applicator into dark kohl, smoothed oil into their skin, and arranged their linen garments before stepping outside. As the final reflections on the ancient Egyptian beauty routine settle into place, what remains most striking is how closely these practices connected everyday life with the larger identity of the civilization. The Egyptians were not simply concerned with appearance in a superficial sense. Instead, grooming became a quiet expression of cultural values that had been shaped by geography, religion, and long tradition. For people living along the Nile, daily routines unfolded within a landscape that rarely changed. The river continued its slow and steady journey northward. The desert stretched beyond the fertile banks, and the sun rose each morning over a land that had supported human life for thousands of years. In this environment, repetition became a natural part of existence. Just as the river followed its path each year, the routines of daily life followed familiar patterns. Personal grooming fit easily into this rhythm. A person might begin the morning with water drawn from the river or from a nearby well. Washing away the dust of the previous day refreshed both body and mind. Oils were then applied to soften the skin, creating a layer of protection against the dryness of the climate. The scent of these oils, sometimes infused with herbs, flowers, or resins, added a subtle fragrance that lingered throughout the day. The familiar cosmetic ritual followed. The small jar of kohl was opened carefully, and the applicator stick dipped into the dark powder. With a steady hand, the cosmetic line was drawn along the eyelid, shaping the eye in the distinctive almond form that has become one of the most recognizable images of ancient Egypt. To modern observers, this style may appear dramatic or decorative, but for Egyptians it carried practical and symbolic meaning. The dark pigment helped reduce the glare of sunlight reflecting from sand and water. It also connected the wearer to powerful symbols of protection, such as the Eye of Horus, which represented healing and watchfulness. Hair and wigs were arranged next. Many Egyptians preferred closely trimmed or shaved hair for comfort in the hot climate, while wigs allowed them to maintain an elegant appearance when needed. These wigs were often crafted with remarkable care, woven from human hair or plant fibers, and sometimes scented lightly with oils. Once hair was prepared, linen garments were wrapped or tied around the body. Linen was valued for its lightness and breathability, making it ideal for life in a warm environment. Fresh linen added to the feeling of cleanliness that Egyptians associated with proper grooming. Jewelry and amulets might then be added to complete the presentation. A necklace of beads, a bracelet of gold, or a small protective symbol worn close to the chest provided both decoration and spiritual reassurance. Each piece could carry meaning that connected the wearer to religious beliefs or family traditions. With these steps finished, the individual was ready to step outside and begin the activities of the day. What makes this routine so fascinating is how consistent it remained across centuries. Egyptian culture valued continuity and stability. The same visual ideals, smooth skin, defined eyes, balanced appearance, were admired generation after generation. This stability helped create the powerful visual identity that we now associate with ancient Egypt. Even when foreign cultures entered the region through trade or conquest, many of these grooming habits endured. The routines were deeply rooted in Egyptian life and adapted easily to new circumstances without losing their essential character. Religion also reinforced the importance of personal care. Egyptian belief emphasized the idea that the world functioned best when balance and order were maintained. The concept known as ma'at represented this universal harmony. By keeping the body clean, orderly, and well prepared, individuals symbolically participated in maintaining that balance. This perspective extended into the afterlife as well. Egyptians believed that life would continue beyond death, and therefore the body needed to remain complete and prepared. Cosmetic tools, mirrors, jewelry, and grooming items were often placed in tombs, so the deceased could continue their routines in the next world. Today, archaeologists continue to uncover these objects. A small cosmetic jar may still contain traces of pigment used thousands of years ago. A mirror may still reflect light much as it did in an ancient household. These discoveries remind us that history is not only preserved in grand monuments but also in the personal belongings of ordinary people. Through these small artifacts, we can imagine someone standing in a quiet room long ago, holding a polished mirror and carefully preparing their face before stepping out into the sunlight along the Nile. In that moment, the beauty of ancient Egypt was not something distant or ceremonial. It was something personal and immediate, an everyday expression of care, identity, and harmony with the world. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of the ancient Egyptian beauty routine. Beneath the towering pyramids and magnificent temples lived a civilization sustained by simple rituals repeated day after day. By the time we reach the end of this long exploration, the ancient Egyptian beauty routine reveals itself not as a collection of cosmetics, but as a quiet reflection of how an entire civilization understood life. What began as practical care for the body slowly evolved into a tradition that connected environment, belief, social identity, and daily habit. For the people who lived along the Nile, beauty was never separated from ordinary existence. It was something practiced each morning before the day's work began. In small homes built of sun-dried mud brick, in larger houses belonging to officials and nobles, and even within the royal palaces, the routine followed similar steps. The day began with water. In a land where the desert surrounded the narrow green valley of the Nile, water held enormous importance. Washing the body removed dust carried by desert winds and refreshed the skin after the heat of the previous day. Even simple washing could create a feeling of renewal before stepping into the sunlight. After cleansing came oils. These oils softened the skin and protected it from dryness caused by the hot Egyptian climate. Many oils were blended with fragrances taken from plants, flowers, and imported resins. The scent that remained on the skin throughout the day created an atmosphere of quiet elegance. In busy streets or crowded gatherings, fragrance was a subtle signal that someone had taken care in preparing themselves. Then came the most recognizable step in the entire routine, the application of kohl. A small cosmetic jar would be opened, and a thin applicator stick dipped into the dark pigment. Carefully, the line was drawn along the eyelid. The shape extended outward toward the temple, forming the almond-shaped outline we now associate so strongly with Egyptian art. This cosmetic style served several purposes. It helped reduce the intense glare of sunlight reflecting from sand and water. It protected the delicate skin around the eyes from irritation. And it also carried symbolic meaning, echoing the protective eye of Horus found throughout Egyptian religion and mythology. Hair or wigs were arranged next. Because of the heat, many Egyptians preferred short or shaved hair. Wigs allowed them to maintain an elegant appearance without the discomfort of managing natural hair in the desert climate. Crafted from human hair or plant fibers, wigs could be styled into curls or straight sections and sometimes lightly scented with oils. Afterward came clothing. Linen garments were wrapped around the body, their pale color reflecting sunlight and helping keep the wearer cool. Linen had been the preferred fabric of Egypt for thousands of years, woven from flax grown along the fertile banks of the Nile. Fresh linen added another layer of cleanliness and order to the appearance. Jewelry and amulets completed the preparation. Necklaces, rings, bracelets, and protective symbols were worn both for decoration and spiritual meaning. Some amulets represented divine protection, while others signaled status or personal identity. Even the simplest bead necklace added color and individuality to the clean lines of linen clothing. Once these steps were finished, the person stepped out into the world. From that point forward, the activities of daily life began. Farmers worked in the fields, artisans shaped tools and ornaments, merchants traded goods in busy markets, and officials carried out the duties of administration. Yet beneath all of these roles remained the quiet routine that had prepared each individual for the day. What is truly remarkable is how long this routine endured. Ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years, one of the longest continuous cultural traditions in human history. During that time, many aspects of life changed slowly, but the core ideas of beauty remained surprisingly stable. Balance, cleanliness, harmony. These values reflected a deeper philosophical idea known as Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order that Egyptians believed sustained the universe. Living in harmony with Ma'at meant maintaining balance not only in government and religion, but also in personal behavior and appearance. A well-groomed body symbolized a well-ordered life. This belief extended even into death. Egyptians prepared their tombs with the same objects they had used in daily life. Mirrors, cosmetic containers, combs, and jewelry were placed beside the deceased so that familiar routines could continue in the afterlife. When archaeologists uncover these objects today, they reveal an intimate connection to people who lived thousands of years ago. A small cosmetic jar still holding traces of dark pigment tells us that someone once stood before a mirror and carefully prepared their eyes before stepping outside. These quiet moments are rarely recorded in grand historical texts, yet they form an essential part of human history. The beauty of ancient Egypt was not created only by queens, kings, or temple priests. It was created every morning by ordinary people repeating the same careful actions. Looking into a polished mirror, tracing a line of kohl along the eyelid, smoothing oil across the skin, adjusting linen garments in the warm desert light. Through these small rituals, repeated across generations, the visual identity of Egypt slowly took shape,